We continue now at the top of Daf Nun Aleph and Beis in Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 51b. On the previous summit, the Gemara had a contradiction in Brises. One Brise said that if a first person digs the pit 10 tvachim and then another makes it 20 tvachim, another makes it 30 tvachim, they're all going to be chayiv. And the second Brise said that if one person digs it 10 tvachim but it still doesn't have hevel, and then another person goes and plasters within it, makes it a little more narrow and gives it hevel, so then only the last one is chayiv. And so how do we resolve this contradiction? And the Gemara says, Leima har Rebbe har Rabbanan. Let us suggest that maybe one Brise is Rebbe and one Brise is the Rabbanan. And Rashi explains, let's say that the Brisa, which says that they're all chayiv, that follows Rebbe. The Amar Le'el, he said earlier on the previous summit, let's say one person digs it 9 tvachim, the other person makes it 10 tvachim. So since that first person made it enough that it could cause damage, to have his shutuf bin nizaken. So Rebbe said he's considered a partner. If a damage happens, not death, they're all going to be responsible. So in this case, where the first person actually did it 10 tvachim, he did it enough to kill, have a kulam shutfin b'tashlum. Misa, they're all going to be partners in terms of paying. Let's say it causes an animal to die. That's going to be harebi. And the other one, the second Bryce of Katani Achron Chayev Rishon Pater, the one that says that only the last person is Chayev and the first one is Pater, that's Rabbanan. That's the Rabbanan in the previous Amud. The Daiki Isha Echad V'lo Shnaim. They make that diuk earlier. They learned from the pasuk that only one person is Chayev and not two of them, and that's what's happening over here as well. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Zvid says, Hava ha-Rabbanan. Really, we could say both Brises are the Rabbanan. Adkan lo ka'amri Rabbanan achron chayiv. Now, the Rabbanan only say the last person is chayiv. Elahecha de lo avid kamos shir misa. That's if the first person didn't do enough that it was able to kill. Avalhecha de avid kamos shir misa. But let's say the first person, like the first Brise over there, which said the first person digs 10 tvachim, then another person 20 tvachim, then 30 tvachim. So there the first person already did a shir misa. So afilu Rabbanan modu de kulan chayav. And so then even the Rabbanan admit that they're all going to share in the responsibility. They are all chayiv. And the Gemara says, "V'hasayid v'chayid dekavid kamashir misa." But what about the case where the second person just plasters? Didn't the first person make it 10 tvachim deep? Didn't he do a shir misa? V'katani achron chayiv. And yet we're saying over there only the last person is chayiv. And the Gemara says to that, Amri, they answer, Hasam shelo hayabo hevel lemisa. Over there the case is that there was not enough hevel to cause death. Uba acher v'hosef ba hevel lemisa. And so the second one, when he puts on the plaster, he's causing it to be narrower. He's causing it to have hevel that causes death, and that's why it's only the last person that is responsible. Ika de Amri, there are those that say, another answer to the two Brises, Amar Rav Zvid says, Hava HaRevi, you could say that they're both really Rebbe. Hach de Katani Kulan Chayav and Shaper. Now the one that says they're all Chayav, that works out well. Rebbe again says they share the responsibility. Ha de Katani Achron Chayav. Now the one that says that only the last person is Chayav, meaning the one who added the plaster, Kagon Shalo Hayabo Hevel Lo Lemisa Velo Linizakin, will simply say that first person, there was not enough Hevel to cause death. There was not even enough Hevel to cause damage, to cause injury. That's why that first person is not responsible. And then the last person came along and he made it that there was enough hevel, whether for death, whether for injury, and that's why the last person is chayiv. And Rashi explains in the first answer, Afilu Rabbanan Modu, even the Rabbanan would admit that if the first person made it enough that it could kill, everyone shares in the responsibility. Dechiksiv miyuta, because when do we exclude? And when do we say that only the last person is chayiv? Achofer bor tesksiv. That's in the case where the first person only dug it 9 tvachim. Deleka lechiyuve min v'hamesi elo, because then there's no v'hamesi elo, because again, he didn't make it large enough to kill. Damaskana demilsa min v'hamesi elo nafkal, and that's what we end up learning out, that the last person is chayiv from v'hamesi elo, that the person who made it large enough to kill is chayiv. Again, you're not going to learn the whole thing from there, because the pasuk also comes for what we said on the previous Amud for Rava's teaching. And again, we said that in a situation where it did not have enough hevel lemisa, and so then we would say that only the last person is chayiv. It was very wide. Mishum hachi pater af ben izak, and that's why you pater totally. Then we apply the drasha of Ishachar v'lo shnayim to have a lekechofer bortes u'ba'acher v'shlim al asar. That's already the same thing as if the first person just dug it 9 tvachim and someone else 10 tvachim. And then the second answer, the Gemara was Hava HaRevi. Both Brises are actually Revi. To ilu Rabbanan ki hechi de patri chofer tes menizakin patri nami hachalekamai. Because according to this answer, we'll say according to the Rabbanan, just like they say the first person is pater if he dug 9, so too over here they're going to say the first person is pater. And according to Rabbi, kagon shalo hayabo hevel lo lemisa v'lo lenizakin. nizakin. We'll say according to Rebbe, if the first person dug it in a fashion where there was not enough hevel for misa or nizakin, so then he's not responsible. Hilkach rishon pater af b'nizakin. That's why the first person is pater, even in terms of damages. Rashi notes, ve'ali b'derav. This answer is obviously following Rav, that a person is chayiv on board because of hevel. Diamar lahavlo v'lo lachavto. He says a person is chayiv because he creates the hevel, not the impact. Ve'ali b'derebi itzrich l'shanuye shelo haya bo hevel afilu l'nizakin. And Rashi also points out, if we're saying that it's going according to Rebbe, you have to say it didn't even have enough hevel to create injury. The ilu haya bo hevel l'nizakin, because according to Rebbe, if there was enough hevel for injury, have a rishon shutaf l'nizakin, and the first person would at least be considered responsible for the nizakin as a partner in that responsibility. Now Rashi notes that you could understand this answer according to Shmuel as well. V'l'Shmuel damar afal achavata chayva Torah. Now according to Shmuel, who says that you're even chayv on the impact, so muki lo, you can say that this answer still works. B'molei sfugos bekarkosov, let's say there's wool all on the bottom of the pit, the ein kan chavet, so there is no impact. The only possible chiyuv in that scenario would be hevel, and so again, that's what we would say. The first person dug it in a fashion where there was no hevel for misa or nizakin, and that's why the last person is chayiv. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, Hiniach even al pi abor, if somebody puts stones around the pit, ve'shalim al asar, so then they're essentially raising the rim of the pit, and now they've made it that it's a 10 tefachim fall, so banu l'machlokis Rebbe v'Rabbanan, that would be the same machlokis between Rebbe and the Rabbanan. You have a situation where the first person only made it enough for nizikin, and then the second person made it enough that it could kill. And the Gemara says, Pshita, well, isn't that obvious? The Gemara says, not necessarily obvious. Maybe if he dug it a little deeper, so that is his hevel, so to speak, that he's adding, he made it lower, so then we say he's responsible. But let's say he just adds along the top, so it's not really his hevel that is causing the killing. I might not say it's the same. Kamash Malon, so that's what we're teaching over here, that it is the same. Rashi says, Banu l'machlokas Rabbi v'Rabbanan, meaning l'Rabbanan, according to the Rabbanan, Achron chayev bein l'nizakin bein l'misa. The last person is chayev totally for nizakin and misa, because again, he created it as a board that could kill. L'Rebbe Achron l'misa, Achar shneim l'nizakin. According to Rebbe, the last one would be responsible totally for misa, but they actually both would be responsible for nizakin. And then the Gemara said, Pshita, well, isn't that obvious? Mali hosef lamata, mali hosef lamala. What difference would it be if he added below, meaning he dug it a little bit deeper, or if he added above, he raised the rim? No, what might you have said? Bein l'Rebbe, bein l'Rabbanan, achron pater. Maybe if he just raises the rim, the last guy's pater. The lav havlo didei kadli. It's not really his hevel, because the hevel's there at the bottom of the pit, and he's raising it from the top. Maybe you would say that, and so it's teaching us over here that that is not the case. And the Gemara continues, Boy Rava asks the following question, Tam tefach v'silek avon of mahu. Rashi says, Tam tefach, hachofer bortes, means somebody digs the pit 9, v'acher hishlimu lasar, somebody else completes it to 10, v'chazer achron v'sasam umilei offer oso tefach shahosef, and then that guy who made it from 9 to 10 fills that little tefach that he did, and now it's back to 9 again. That's the question over here. Again, Boy Rava, Tam tefach v'silek avon of mahu, he filled it a tefach, or he removed the stones that made it be 10 tefachim. So what would be the halacha? Mi amrina, do we say my da'avat shakli, that which he did, he took away, and now the first person is going to be totally chayiv in whatever injury happens. O dilmam nistalku ma'aser rishon, or maybe no, when he actually made it to be 10 tefachim, so what the first person did has now been erased. V'kamalei kulei bereshusei, and now the entire bor is really the responsibility of the second individual at this point in time going forward, even if he takes away what he did. And the Gemara says, with the Gemara leaves that as a question. And Rashi again explains, my da'avat shakli, maybe we say that whatever he did, he took away, v'rishon chayiv ben nizakin, and the first person would therefore be chayiv in nizakin and any damages. Or maybe we say, no, kamalei b'reshusei, it's now entirely his bor, v'havalei hashta bor tisha de achron, it's like a bor that's 9 tefachim of the last person, v'chayiv miha ben nizakin, and the last person would then be chayiv in nizakin, he would be chayiv in damages. And the Gemara says, take what the Gemara leaves that as a question. And the Gemara continues at the two dots, Amar Rabba bar Chana, Amar Shmuel bar Marasa. Rabba bar Chana says that Shmuel bar Marasa says, Bor shemonu mehen shnei tvachim mayim. Let's say you have a bor that's 8 tvachim deep, but the bottom 2 tvachim, it's filled with water. Chayiv, in that case, he's also chayiv. That's considered to be the equivalent of a bor that is 10 tvachim. My time, what's the reason? Called tefach demaya kitrei diyabosha dami. If you have a tefach that's filled with water, that's the equivalent of 2 that are dry, and so essentially each of those last 2 tvachim is really like 4 tvachim. The total of the 2 tvachim is really like 4 tvachim. You double it, and therefore you have a situation over here where even though though it's only 8 tefachim, but you add another 2 tefachim, and it's really a 10 tefach bor, and therefore he's responsible. And the Gemara says, according to that, they then had the following question: Bor tishu mehen tefach echad mayim. What if it would be a 9 tefachim, and then you'd have 1 tefach of water? Do we say the same thing? Mi amrin on kaven delo nefishi maya les behavla. On the one hand, do we say that since it's not enough water, it doesn't really create that same hevel? Maybe it has to specifically be 2 tvachim of water. O dilmar, maybe not. Kaven do amik tvei is behavla. Maybe since it's a little bit of a deeper pit, so there is hevel. And then you can ask the question the other direction: Bor shivu mehen shlosha tvachim mayimau. What if it's a 7 tefach pit and 3 of the tvachim are water? Mi amrin on kaven de nefishi mayim tvei is behavla. Maybe we say since it's more water, so it's more hevel, and it's the same problem. O dilmar, maybe kaven de lo amka, since it's not really deep enough, less behavla, doesn't have the hevel, and the Gemara says teku. Again, the Gemara leaves that as a question. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. Boy minei Rav Shizvi may Rabba. Rav Shizvi asks Rabba the following question: Hirchiva ma. What if he makes it wider? Rashi says Hirchiva echad chofer bor yud, meaning one person dug a pit, it's 10 tvachim deep. Uba chaveiro v'hirchiv piv, and then somebody else comes along and he makes the opening of the pit wider. Essentially, it's a little bit more dangerous. It's easier to fall in. But on the other hand, he also decreased the amount of hevel by making it wider. So what's the halacha? Amar lei, so he said back to him, Harei miyed havla. He made the hevel less, and therefore it's good what he did. Amar lei, so he said back to him. The other one said back, Adrab, on the contrary, Harei kirev hezeka. Didn't he make it easier to get damaged because now it's easier for a person to fall in? And so the Gemara says, Elo Amar Ravashi, rather Ravashi says, Nichsi anon, let us see. If the person died because of the hevel, harei miyad havla, the second person made less hevel, so it's not his fault. But if the person died because of the chavot, because of the impact, harei kirev hezeka. So really, the person who made it wider, he's actually caused more of the damage, and therefore he's responsible. There are those that have a slightly different version of the analysis. Amar Ravashi says, Nichzi anon, let us see. If the person fell in from the side where it was expanded, so he caused that damage to be more in proximity. But if the person fell on the other side, so then it had nothing to do with the extra digging, harei miyad havla, on the contrary, he actually made there be less hevel, and he would not be responsible. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. Itmar, we have the following machlokas amoroim. Borsha omka kirachva. Let's say you have a pit that it's exactly the same depth as its width. Rabba v'Rav Yosef da'armi tarvayu. Mishmei de Rabba bar Barchana. Rabba and Rav Yosef, both in the name of Rabba bar Barchana. Diomar mishmei de Rabbi Moni, who said in the name of Rabbi Moni. So the machlokas is as follows. Chad Omar, one of them says, meaning Rabba or Rav Yosef, one of them says, Liolam yesh bo hevel. That is a situation where it always is considered to have hevel. Ad shei rachva yeser alomka, unless the width is more than the depth. But if it's exactly the same, it does have hevel. The Chadam, the other one, says the other way around, Liolam ein bo hevel. It really does not have hevel, ad shei omka yeser al rachva, unless the depth is more than the width. Otherwise, if it's exactly the same, again, it has no hevel. That is a machlokus. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. The Mishnah said, Avar olav harishon v'lo kiseyu. Again, it said, if let's say you have the first person and he doesn't cover it, and then the second person doesn't cover the pit, it's the second person that is responsible. And the Gemara asks, V'rishon me'emas mifter, but the first one, how does he get out of it? The Gemara assumes that really the first person should be just as responsible as the second, unless he did something to hand over the responsibility to the second person. So what exactly does he have to do to hand over that responsibility? Rabba v'Rav Yosef da'amri tarvayu mishmei de Rabba bar Barchana di'amar mishmei de Rabbi Moni. Again, it's Rabba and Rav Yosef. They both say in the name of Rabba bar Barchana. That said in the name of Rabbi Moni. Machlokas as follows. Chad Amar, one of them says, Misheminicho mishtamish. As long as he leaves that second person and the second person is in middle of using it, so he essentially handed it over automatically, the responsibility goes to the second person. The Chad Amar, the other one says, no, Mishayimsar lo dolyav. He actually has to give him the cover of the pit. If he gives him the cover of the pit, then he's essentially handing him that responsibility. And the Gemara says, Kitanoi, let us say it's a machlokas tanoim. Hamad l'mayim min habor. Let's say a person is filling water from a pit. Uvach aveiro v'amar lo, and his friend comes and says, Hanach li v'ani ad l'mayim. He says, leave me here and I'm going to take water. Kevan sheinicho mishtamish pater. Once he leaves him and he's using the pit, that first person is now pater. He's no longer responsible. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov omer mishayimsar lo dolyav. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, no, he's only not responsible if he actually hands over the cover of the pit to that individual. And the Gemara says, so what exactly is the machlokas about? The Gemara explains Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Savar. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds Yesh Breira. He holds Yesh Breira. What that means to say is that retroactively, if you have two partners who own this pit, but when each one is using it, that which he takes is actually his. You essentially say he takes his portion and the other person takes his own portion. So therefore, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, Hai mididei kamemale, v'hai mididei kamemale. Each person is really taking from his own, and therefore, since each person is taking from his own portion, he doesn't share the responsibility of the other portion. He doesn't take over that portion, and that's why Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says we don't say the second person is automatically responsible. Rather, we say the second person is only responsible if he's actually handed over the responsibility. Otherwise, we say yesh breira. Whatever he's taking is, so to speak, his own portion, and the other person is responsible for his portion. And the Gemara continues, v'rabbanan savri, but the Rabbanan hold ein breira. There is no breira, and therefore, when we're saying there is no breira, essentially that second person takes over the full responsibility automatically of the bore of the pit. And Rashi explains, V'rishon me'emas mifter, again, the first person, what does he have to do to be pater? The niton al hasheni hoisa hashmir, that we're going to say the second person is responsible to watch. The pshita lon dahani over the katani masnis nishtamish kamer. It's obvious to us that something has to happen where he hands over the responsibility to the second. Deike the katani masnis and sha'avru all of shnei and zachar zeh. If it's just that one person used it and then the second person, amai rishon pater, that's not a reason. Why should the first person be pater? Hare gam hu pasha, he also was negligent and then covered up. If it's just what it sounds like in the Mishnah where the first person used it and didn't cover it, and the second person then he used it and didn't cover it, they should both be responsible unless, again, there was some handing over of responsibility. And Rashi continues, Dalyo, again, that's the handing over of the cover, Kisui Habor Lechasoso, that's the cover of the pit to cover it up. Sharishon Pascho Vidala, the point over here is that according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, the first person opened it and he took what he needed. Uba Sheni Umotso, and then the second person came, Umasar Lo Rishon as Kisui Habor, and the first person gives him, hands him over the cover. That means the second person is responsible. And then the Gemara said that the machlokus actually is whether there is breira or not. Again, according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, if he doesn't actively hand over the cover of the pit, so then we say that they share the responsibility because of yesh breira, and the idea is v'hai mididei kamemale, that each person is taking from his own. V'lo havele sheni shoal al chelko shel rishon. The point is, according to Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, when that second person is filling up, he's not a borrower on the portion of the first. It's not like he is the one that's essentially taken responsibility over this entire bore. Sheikulo mutol all of the shomer, that he has to watch it all. Hilkachem hizik shneim chayav, and that's why they're both chayiv. Avol moser lo esadli, but if he gives him the cover already, Nas says that shomer shekibel all of the chasoso. Then he's basically saying, I'm taking responsibility, I'm accepting that I'm the one that should cover up this pit. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravina says, V'yazdu l'tamai, with this machlokas about breira between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, we find that in a different place as follows. The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Hashutfin shenodru hanoah zeh mizeh. Let's say you have two people that are partners, and they take a neder that they're not going to get benefit from one another. So Asurin likanis l'chatzir, they're not allowed, let's say they share a chatzir, they can't enter into the chatzir because they're then getting hanoah. That one partner is getting hanoah from the other partner. And the idea over there is, why is he getting hana from the other partner? Because we do not say breira according to the Rabbanan. Since we don't say breira, you're essentially, everybody owns, they both own everything, and he's getting hana by going into the chutzir. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, no, it's not a problem, because zen nichnas l'soch shelo, v'zen nichnas l'soch shelo, because this one enters his own property. We say wherever he goes, that's his property. It's not the other one's property. He's not benefiting from the other partner, and it's not a problem. As Rashi says, l'soch shelo kol heicha da'ayil, everywhere where he goes, yachol omar zechel, he could say, this is my portion. Shani borer mahani le breira. Breira essentially is effective for this person, and so you see the same machlokus as the Gemara now explains. But my kamiflagi, what exactly is the machlokus here? Again, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov savar yesh breira hayla denafshei ayil v'hayla denafshei ayil. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says there is a concept of breira, so each one is using his own property. Rabbanan savri ain't breira, and the Rabbanan hold there is no concept of breira. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Elazar says, Hamocher bor lechaveru, if somebody sells a pit to his friend, Kevan shemasar lo dalyav, once he gives him the cover of the pit, kana, that is the kinyan. The Gemara says, Hechi dami, what exactly is the case? I bechaspa, if they're making a kinyan with kesef, with money, likni bechaspa, so there should be a kinyan with kesef. And I bechazaka, if we're talking about a kinyan of chazaka, which is essentially using it, which is a way to be kona land, likni bechazaka, let him make a kinyan chazaka. What's going on here with giving the cover? And the Gemara says, Leolam b'chazaka. Really, we are talking about a kinyan chazaka. Uboy lemei marlei lechazeko kani. But when you make a kinyan chazaka, the person has to say to the other person, go and make your chazaka and make your kinyan. V'kevan shemasalo daliv. And when he gives him the cover, kiman da'amar, that's the equivalent of telling him lechazeko kani dami. That's the equivalent of saying lechazeko kani. And the Gemara continues at the Tudat. Some Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, Hamocher bayis l'chaver. If somebody sells a house to his friend, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Nun Beis Amud Aleph.